Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. So if you don't know me, hi, I'm Shelly and I talk about books and reading. If you are new here, or maybe if you've been here before and you haven't subscribed, this is a gentle nudge, a tiny reminder to maybe subscribe. I would love to have you stick around. So I'm in a slightly different location today. Today I am at my parents' house in California, and you will probably see several of my videos either here or in other spots of their house because we are on our family vacation. While I'm on vacation, I love to keep up with my reading, even if it's in smaller, less of an intense way than when I'm back home back home. But yeah, while I'm here, I'm definitely doing some reading, but I've also got a couple of videos that I've wanted to film. There's a couple of conversations that I've wanted to have. And yeah, so anyway, today what I am doing, let's get around back to the point. Today what I am doing is I am wrapping up what I read in June. So I read 11 books in June, and they really run the gambit. They run the range. I have fiction, nonfiction, graphic novels, a bunch of different genres. I have new, old, everything in between. And yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the fiction books I read first, and then the nonfiction books, and then the graphic novels. And so yeah, so I'm going to try and leave editing Shelly, remember to leave chapters down below so that everybody can navigate. So in case you want to watch the video through and go back to your favorite part, or skip around to your heart's content, then you can. Okay, so let's start with the fiction books that I read, excluding graphic novels. Okay. So the first book that I finished was The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. I read this with my friend Sonja and my friend Deb. They are commenters here on BookTube and readers, wonderful ladies. We read this together, and this was quite the ride. I really loved it. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo has been read and talked about and all of that, but it's a really great story. It's about a reporter that has fallen from grace, Michael, and he is trying to solve a cold case that has been cold for a long time, and he ends up kind of getting paired up with Lisbeth Salinger, who is much younger than him and is a bit of an internet whiz and has quite the rebellious streak in her, and the two of them together have a really great dynamic, and it was super fun. I don't read many thrillers, I don't read any mysteries hardly ever, and so this was just a totally different change of pace and a great way to start summer reading. I think of June as the beginning of summer, probably because my kids are out of school now, and I'm mom full-time. I'm mom full-time anyways, but taking care of the kiddos, doing summer things, swimming outside, planting plants, doing all the stuff. And The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo really fit in with that vibe. That's what I was getting to. Okay, the next book that I read was Young Mungo by Douglas Stuart. I read this with the Up to No Good book club, which is a book club that meets offline, but many of us have channels. And I will leave everyone's channel linked down below in case you want multiple opinions about Young Mungo, because we read this together. And so I read Young Mungo by Douglas Stuart, which is a book that came out this year, and it is about a young man it's a coming-of-age story about young Mungo, who is the youngest of a family of 4, and he has his siblings and his mother. That's his family of 4, and his mother has some issues with drinking. Actually, I wouldn't just say some, she has some devastating and twisted issues with drinking, and her family suffers the consequences, and Mungo being the youngest, seems to have a really unique dynamic with everyone in his family, and the novel itself touches on themes of masculinity, most predominantly, which I was fascinated by. I love this book. I thought it was fantastic and just brilliant in its own way. Really loved it. I talked about it a bit differently in my conversation that I had with Fraser Simons at the channel Springboard Thought. And I will leave our conversation linked down below, and so you'll get kind of an idea of where this fell in my reading life in that video. Okay, so continuing with fiction reads, the next was a Victorian. We have Elizabeth Gaskell and her book North and South. This was, I'm trying to get better at when it was published, so one moment. Okay, so North and South was originally published in 1854. I read North and South with Jack at Spread Bookjoy, who is wonderful. She has a channel here on BookTube. I'm going to leave her link down below. And the way we read North and South was really fascinating. We read 2 chapters a day for 3 weeks, and we checked in, her and I, every single day. And that was a really fascinating way to read really any book, but this book in particular, because you're taking it at a pretty slow pace, and you're having to consider the book in smaller bites. And it really kind of forced me to slow down and think about the book and where it was going almost every single day. And that was great. I don't know, I would highly encourage you, if you are feeling a bit stuck or you want to change up your reading a tiny bit, change up your pacing, because that really rendered a very fascinating experience, at least with North and South. North and South is a Pride and Prejudice, enemies to lovers-esque type story that is set in the Victorian time period. So we're, I think, in the middle of the 1800s, and it centers around the protagonist Margaret, who is very parental towards her parents, who have a very kind of stressful dynamic with each other, but they have a really intimate relationship with their daughter, and they move from kind of a more uppity pastoral lifestyle to a city, and that change renders a lot of different experiences for each of the characters. Gaskell doesn't shy away from hard topics like class, prejudices, and grief, and the book was fascinating, wonderful, fascinatingly paced, because when there was about a quarter left, Jack and I kind of looked at each other. We had a moment, I guess. We got together, we had a moment, and we were like, where's the book going to go from here? How is she going to stretch the end out? Because we kind of felt like we got to the end point, and she still did it. She kept me entertained. She kept me wondering what was going to happen. She kept things going, and not in an annoying way, in a way that was really fun and wanted me to keep reading. I really enjoyed North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, and would highly recommend anybody who's especially fans of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen to pick up North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, because it was great. It was great. Okay, 2 more fiction books that I read this month. The first of which that I'm going to talk about, and then I'll talk about the one that actually didn't work for me, the last. So the first one is Chouette by Claire Oshetsky. Okay, Chouette is a weird book. I have been hearing about it from Fraser Simons at the channel Springboard Thought, but I've also heard about it from Lindy at the channel Lindy's Magpie Reads. She talked about it most recently, and so I picked it up as an audiobook, just like Lindy had listened to it, and I listened to it on my travels. I finished it in one day, and it's a weird one. It's about a woman who gives birth to a baby owl, and she you get the sense that the baby owl is a metaphor or a stand-in for a child who is born with perhaps disabilities, different abilities, or maybe is just has some special needs of some sort, but it's instead she's looking at it, the mother in the book is looking at her child like a baby owl, and just saying that the baby owl is different and acting different, and so the narrative kind of goes in this very specific direction for most of the book, and then at the near the end, the final act, it goes off the chain. It was fascinating, interesting to experience, slightly off the rails, and I don't know, it was different. I can't say that I dislike the experience, but I would say that I don't think the reading experience is for everybody. But I did quite enjoy it. And I would say people who are fans perhaps of Nightbitch, or maybe Nightbitch by Rachel Yoder, even though I feel like Claire Oshetsky, right? I feel like she executed the story so much better than Rachel Yoder did in Nightbitch. But also, I think it reminded me a bit of, the yellow wallpaper in some ways. But I don't know, a little bit different. It was a strange book, y'all. Very cerebral, really interesting. Okay, I'm gonna move on. The last book that I read that didn't really work for me was C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. About the first 6 or 7 chapters I really enjoyed because it reminded me of the opening scene to the movie that Angelica Houston is in. I'll try and put a picture up somewhere. But what I didn't like about it was I feel like it really reinforced gender roles that were just didn't sit right with me. And once that happened, the rest of the book was kind of a bore to get through. I don't know, it wasn't as magical as I remembered it. The first 5 or 6 or 7 chapters were, and the rest of the book was a bit of a disappointment. Let's move on to nonfiction, which will really kind of help us go into the graphic novels. So the nonfiction book that I read that I loved was Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard. Now, Michael Clark has been gently encouraging, who is a commenter here on my channel, has been gently encouraging me to read Pilgrim at Tinker Creek for quite a while. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I read this with Sandy and Miss Reads a Lot, my friend Sonia, who I've mentioned before, and Fraser Simons at the channel Springboard Thought. And we all read this together, and then something really interesting happened. I really was vibing with Annie Dillard as she was talking about bugs and nature and seeing things differently and changing our minds. And she was just meditating on the beauty of nature. I was here for it, okay? And then I was like, guys, aren't you here for it too? And everybody else was like, I think you're really liking the book, Shelley. Because everybody liked it, or like, well, it ranged from not liking it to liking it. You know, here's the range: not liking it, right? I'm trying to say not liking it to liking it, and then I was like over here, and I was like, it's amazing, I love it, it's great, fantastic. I just thought it was great. Yeah, so if you couldn't tell, I really loved Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard, and I just thought it was phenomenal. Again, it's basically she goes out into nature. Annie Dillard does. It goes out into nature for a year and meditates on it and thinks about it and looks at it, and it doesn't really have, the book itself doesn't really have a plot. It's very meandering. She goes in and out of different thoughts, and it's very literary in the fact that she's not out there trying to give you answers to questions, but mostly you're just there to wander about with her and think about nature, and she is leading the way through this book, and I just loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I think it just was what I needed at the time. It was pre-travel days. I was feeling quite anxious about getting everything together in the way that I wanted, and Annie Dillard helped me kind of slow down and think about bugs for a while. Okay, so the reason why I said that nonfiction will lead right straight into graphic novels is because I read some memoirs and in the form of graphic novels, and what I read was Art Spiegelman's Mouse. I read this as a buddy read with Fraser Simon at the channel Springboard Thought, who I've already mentioned. And if you don't know anything about Mouse, recently it's been getting some hype because it was banned and then the book immediately sold out, but it tells the story of Art Spiegelman, who is a comic artist, trying to tell the story of his dad, who is a Holocaust survivor. And so Art Spiegelman not only is trying to accurately portray his father through his time in the Holocaust, and even beforehand, before he, as the political climate is changing, and his father is trying to basically stay out of concentration camps, or trying to stay away from getting caught from the Nazis. So he's trying to tell his father's story and accurately describe Auschwitz and the concentration camps, But Art Spiegelman is also doing this thing where he's trying to understand his father, and it is very much, you're seeing Art Spiegelman's internal life as he is trying to process who his father is and what this experience of living through this trauma, trying to understand what that meant for his dad, even though Art himself will never ever be able to experience that himself. And so it's really interesting. It's a book of storytelling, but processing and trying to understand and being imperfect, and also just yeah, it's great. I love it. It's such a great book. And this was a reread for me. I read it in college, and so it also had special meaning for me, going back and revisiting a story that I really, really enjoyed. And I enjoyed it just as much the second time. It was so great. Actually, I may have even enjoyed it more. I really enjoyed revisiting the story. And again, like some of the imagery and the parts that stood out to me way back 15 years ago, 12 years ago or something, again stood out to me again, you know, at this reread, and that was fascinating. I finished From Hell by Alan Moore, which tells the story of Jack the Ripper. That is a very basic way to talk about From Hell by Alan Moore. There's a conversation that may go up soon on Fraser Simon's channel, and I will leave a link when that goes live. I will leave a link to that conversation down below, but we talk about our experience reading From Hell by Alan Moore because we read it together. It was fascinating. There's definitely some moments where it's very mind-blowing. It's a very, very strange experience, and I will leave it at that. But if you love comic books, if you like comic reading experiences, this is like the definition of like a literary graphic novel, and done really, really well. And yes, Alan Moore has his own brand and niche of like storytelling, and it's fascinating, enjoyable, entertaining, and yeah, all of that goes for From Hell. And then the last book that I read, which was definitely on a whim because I saw it at Lindy's Magpie Reads, who I've already mentioned, and that is Heartstopper. I read Heartstopper Volume 1. Oh my goodness, this was just wonderful. I read it in 45 minutes or something like that. I read it basically in one sitting. Charming. It's I don't even know if it's a coming of age story. It's a high school gay love story in the form of a graphic novel, and it is really sweet, but I'm going to borrow Lindy's phrase. It's sweet but not too sweet, and just the right brand of charming, you know, like just charming. I think her name's Alice Osman, I think, the artist, her specific brand of facial drawings and facial expressions really got me. That was what I showed up for, was the way that the characters were expressing things to one another. It was just fantastic. Yeah, and that was it. So tell me, what did you read this month? What was your standout read? I would love to know. And yeah, that's it. I hope you all are just having the most wonderful, wonderful day and enjoying your summer like I am. And I will catch you all in my next one. Bye, guys.